Hey everyone, so RubyKaigi 2023 in Matsumoto has finished, and we ended the conference on a note where Matsuda-san announced that it was the next conference was going to be in Okinawa, which is really excited. And we just got back from the first after party of several after parties, but my guest here, Kokubun-san, was kind enough to take a break from all the partying to talk to us a little bit about his talk and the conference and what to look forward to next year. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Why don't we start with, you gave an awesome talk about the work that you've done, and I'd love for you to explain in your own words what you spoke about and what we as Rubyists have to look forward to in Ruby 3.3.
So Ruby 3.3 Preview 1 has been released yesterday,
Wow.
and part of the thing that was released was the RJIT. So I think they had two things that were kind of big in that preview release. So one is the RJIT, which is a kind of a new JIT compiler for CRuby, and the other was a parser replacement. And also we actually have a bunch of YJIT performance optimizations, but basically RJIT was the JIT compiler that replaced the other JIT compiler, which is MJIT. And MJIT was the JIT compiler that was merged to 2.6, Ruby 2.6, and YJIT was the merged Ruby JIT compiler merged to 3.1, and RJIT is the thing that is being merged in Ruby 3.3. And the big difference between the existing JIT compilers and the RJIT is that RJIT is a pure Ruby JIT compiler, and you have the capability to replace it with your own JIT compiler. So my talk was about building a JIT compiler on your own. For example, one of my friends, Aaron Patterson, built his own JIT compiler called TenderJIT, and he was able to plug in his own JIT compiler using the interface of the RJIT, because our Ruby in general allows you to do the monkey patching of the existing interface. So RJIT has an entry point for introducing a JIT code, and TenderJIT could replace the RJIT interface for doing the optimizations. So like I introduced things like how you could encode the native code for building your own JIT code, which is helpful for understanding what's kind of going on behind the scenes in the, for example, YJIT. If you haven't been using YJIT, please use it, because it's a pretty good performance for production environments, at least for us in Shopify. And so building your own JIT helps you understand how that works behind the scenes, and like familiarize yourself with the architecture and how that works, and kind of hopefully make you feel comfortable using that in production. So that's kind of the goal.
I think that was an amazing 2-minute explanation of your 40-minute talk. My experience with JITs in terms of thinking hard about them started and ended with Java 1.2, because that introduced Hotspot, which I'm probably older than most people who are like watching this right now. But you know, the TLDR, to use a youth term, is that what YJIT accomplishes and what RJIT also aims to do is that it observes how the Ruby code is running at runtime, and then based on how your particular code is running, like what methods maybe return always the same value for the same inputs, make certain optimizations by recompiling the code and running it closer to the metal. And what I really loved about your talk was that RJIT and your Ruby JIT challenge, which is a repository that you can find a link to either from Kokubun's GitHub repository or from our field guide on testable.com. It actually is kind of like a workbook that you can work through and start by installing your own JIT and then making modifications and testing it out, which I think is really awesome, because that's exactly how Aaron with TenderJIT, and then you also showed John Hawthorne.
Right.
He took a stab at it. I think it's a great way to learn and familiarize yourself with something that's like a really kind of obscure topic that especially we as Rubyists haven't had to think about for a long time, right? So is there anything else about YJIT in Ruby 3.3 that's useful to share for anyone looking forward to the next release?
So Ruby 3.2 has been like having a lot of optimizations, but in 3.3 we are adding a lot of like significant changes to that as well. So one of the things I've been developing in the Ruby 3.3 is stack temporary interrogation. So what is so stack temporary is actually I kind of explained that in the talk, but Ruby virtual machine operates on stack slots in the virtual machine, and the way it works is virtual machine or the interpreter reads memory for operating on the stack of like so-called stack for the virtual machine. However, if you look at the how computer works, computer has like CPU and there's a path that connects the CPU and the memory. And if you read something from the memory, that takes some multiple cycles compared to reading something inside the CPU. So ideally, you want to use something inside the CPU to optimize the behavior for the stack operations. And we have a bunch of registers that are kind of free for you to use if you have the full control over the machine code. So because we are like controlling the machine code for RJIT, we use a set of registers dedicated for the stack operations. So that way, you don't need to go through the path and the memory to do the heavy operations for reading the stack operations, doing the stack operations. So in 3.3, we already merged my optimization that optimizes away the memory operations, and then it just reads registers for executing the virtual machine instructions. So hopefully that will also give you the significant performance improvement in your production application once you deploy or upgrade the 3.2 to 3.3.
And that's another fantastically dense summary that I think it conveys what you built, but why I think we should all care about it is that we want large companies like Shopify to be able to stay on Ruby forever. And so when they have critical sections of code that need to be optimized, making sure that Ruby has the tools necessary for being able to optimize those sections without having to, for example, rewrite, maybe your payment processing in Rust, for example, in order for it to be performant is really important. So even if you don't use this stuff, we're benefiting from it because companies like Shopify are able to continue investing in Ruby. So anyway, thank you for the recap of your talk. I'm curious too, apart from your talk, you were on the last day, right? So you probably were focused mostly on preparing for your presentation. Apart from that, was there anything from the conference that stood out to you as being really fun or enjoyable?
So I kind of mentioned that before this talk, but I was really enjoyed that talk of the Maxine's keynote. So it's kind of like my own teammate, but I joined Shopify last year. It was after the RJIT was written in Rust, so I joined kind of late compared to other originally working people. So Maxime and Ireland started the work by themselves instead of taking the work from somewhere. So they needed to build from scratch, and there was no CRuby JIT compiler that optimizes Rails well at that moment. MJIT was had the capability to technically optimize that well, but we weren't sure how we could make it optimize Rails bench well. So at that moment, it's kind of, you have to invent a way to build a Ruby JIT that is able to optimize the production applications. So they needed to, I can really be able to imagine how hard it would be if you needed to build that by yourself. So now I can just kind of use their own existing capabilities to build something on top of it, but building from scratch is really a difficult experience. I kind of went through that by rebuilding RJIT in the RJIT, but that was really difficult, even if I could just look at the RJIT code to just copy it. But just building something already proven idea is even difficult. So if you needed to build that from scratch, then that would be really difficult. So yeah, I was really impressed by their experience.
And if you're hearing the phrase JIT a lot, you're not alone, because even if you'd been here all week, there were really three dominant themes that kept emerging. There was a talk of the two competing parsers, the new universal parser that Kaneko-san is working on, as well as YARP, yet another Ruby parser that is a Shopify project that I believe Kevin Newton is sort of the lead on. There was also a lot of discussion this week about type systems, and so we of course have RBS and Steep.
Oh, so yeah.
RBS/Steep on one hand, and then also Tapioca and Sorbet on the other in terms of type signature generation as well as type checking. And then the third big category that kept coming up was, of course, JITs. And so figuring out how to make Ruby as performant as possible for long-running applications like servers. So those three topics, if you read our field report, you'll see lots and lots of talks about like those topics keep coming up. And what was so cool about it, and what's something like I feel like is missing from RubyConf and from RailsConf, is because all the talks are about those things. Every time I went to lunch or every time I was in the hallway, people are talking about these issues. And it's actually providing feedback, I believe, to like Ruby core and to the Ruby committers about like, how things could be better. And so the closer that us as users of Ruby can get to these topics, the more that we can actually kind of contribute and shift and steer the direction of Ruby. So I think that this conference is an awesome opportunity for that. Now, one last question for you. Like I mentioned earlier, they just announced that next year's RubyKaigi is going to be in Okinawa, the island far to the south of Honshu, the main island. Why should somebody who's watching this and maybe they've never been to a RubyKaigi before be excited about the prospect of going to next year's RubyKaigi?
Sure, I think it's pretty like if it's going to be your first time, that would be like a really good opportunity to come to Japan because. Okinawa is the like south, like very south, like extreme south,
like
part
3.5 hour flight,
right? And
south.
It's actually I've never been to that place, but I always wanted to go there because it's one of the two like cities that are like extreme side of the Japan. So the north port there is a Hokkaido, and I also wanted to Okinawa, but I've never had a chance to go to there because it's kind of expensive to just fly to that place, even if you were living in Japan. So I'm really excited that the next place is going to be Okinawa because I actually mentioned Okinawa was as one of the places I would like to go. So it's one of the places that is really a good opportunity, like place for sightseeing. So like RubyKaigi has been going to various places because Akira, the organizer, likes to eat foods in various places, which kind of
he also likes to drink.
Right.
So every city has its own specialty Japanese sake,
and which sometimes leads you to go to some weird places. Sometimes, but like Okinawa is one of the very like popular place. So like it's going to be the very first like good place for you to like visit for the first time. So yeah, if you haven't, you should go there this time.
I've been coming to Japan every couple of years for 18 years now, and I've been dragging my wife here almost every time. And the only place in Japan she's ever really wanted to go is Okinawa. The food is great, the people are really friendly, the weather is awesome, and then it's surrounded by ocean, and so there's plenty of like beaches and water sports that you can do. So in addition to the conference being excellent, it's just a great place to travel, a great place to explore, and really, I think, in part, if you're an English speaker, wow. So my gimbal just broke, and I had to make an edit point here.
Sure.
So if you're an English speaker and you go to Okinawa, it's, in my opinion, it's a wonderful. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because my stupid gimbal broke. Yeah, anyway, it's going to be great. And I think this is my phone telling me that it's time to end this interview. Kokubun-san, thank you very much for taking the time today at the end of the conference. Let's cut some of this. I had a lot of fun this week, and I hope you enjoyed our field report. And I'd love to hear your feedback online. So send me a message or leave a comment, and I'll get back to you. Take it easy.